Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. Here's your host, Chris Lee. Commodore fans, on your feet. It's time to anchor down.
Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast presented by Dr. Dodie Jones, DDS. We're part of the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Today's guest, Luke Wyatt. Luke appears on the guest line that is presented by Michael Kendrick of the Kendrick Group. Michael is a local carpenter and a lifelong Vandy fan. He builds bookshelves, cabinets, picture frames, furniture, and made-to-order items, including a display case for my prized Dale Murphy jersey. I've seen Michael's work. He's a true craftsman. If you are in the market for custom woodwork, give Michael a call at 615-830-9458. Our question and answer session with Luke Wyatt is presented by Sutherland & Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call. That number, 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. My apologies for not having a podcast out earlier this week. It's been a difficult week for me with some personal things going on and also the start of spring practice. So we're in that segment of the year where you've got an intersection of spring football, baseball, and basketball, which leaves very little margin for error. And then if something comes in your personal life on top of that, well, there goes your week. And that's kind of been the way it's been for me. So with that, I would like us to do 2 to 3 more podcasts for the foreseeable future per week. And hopefully we'll be able to pull that off. Sometimes that's a little bit different during tournament play when you're playing a game and by the next day, the podcast you just did is already outdated, but that's the plan. Just want to let the audience know what happened this week. That's kind of out of the norm for us. But anyway, with all that said, we hope you enjoy our show today with Luke Wyatt. Luke Wyatt joins us. This is the only podcast I've been able to do this week. It's been a long week for me with a lot of stuff, personally and professionally. But anyway, I apologize. I know that there's been a lot to discuss, and I'd hope to have some stuff out earlier in the week, but life has a different path for you some weeks, and that's kind of where we are. So with that, Luke, thank you for joining us. We'll get people caught up on where Vanderbilt has gone in basketball and baseball since we did this a week ago.
Sure. Now, Chris, first of all, I'm thinking about you and your situations, and I hope everyone out there has patience with all this because we all have things in our life that are much more important than sports. And I know you're dealing with some of those right now, and I'm thinking about you.
Yeah, thanks. It's tough to watch your parents get old.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you're Vanderbilt fans, better news for you. Vanderbilt won a basketball game in Lexington last night in just a very improbable fashion. First of all, I feel like I've seen Vandy, Kentucky play out the same way for about 15 years in Rupp. It's that Vanderbilt, for the most part, goes up there, gives a great fight, leads well into the second half. Kentucky makes a charge in the last 2 or 3 minutes, and it ends in Kentucky's favor. It had for 14 straight times. And last night, I was texting with a friend of mine who covers Missouri, and I just said, this feels like a game they're about to win. And in the back of your head, there's that little voice that says, wait a minute, I've seen this play out 1,000 times, and it kind of always goes the same way. And when Kentucky goes ahead in the final minutes, you're just thinking, and the final minute, I think it was, you're just thinking, there it is. And Jordan Wright had the answer. Antonio Reeves missed at the buzzer, and Vanderbilt snapped a historic losing streak in Lexington.
You know, Chris, and it's one of those things, if I don't tell you the score of a game and I tell you situations that occurred during the game, for instance, obviously the Liam Robbins injury early on, and then Thomas and Studia combined 0 for 12 from the field. Well, if I told you just those 2 things, you'd think, well, Kentucky won by 20 or more. But when you take into consideration how hard our kids played and how much they battled, you know, and I can say this since we won the game, I felt like there was, you know, several times Sheboy got away with murder on rebounds. I just, the guy had 1 foul, and he's been more physical than any of our bigs were the whole night. So that kind of stuff, how we get out of there with a win, 2 things. Jordan Wright, Tyron Lawrence, obviously. Those 2 kids played fantastic. And then you throw Ezra in there, who is just as consistent as can be. And these kids, and it's one of those things I think too, where they kind of rallied and said, "Look, let's try to win this one for Liam," because I know everybody was hurt by that. The kid's battled injuries his whole career, and I'm just really happy for the whole group because, you know, when we were talking about this in a 4-game situation, we said 3-1 would be great. We didn't think the one loss would be at LSU, and we certainly didn't think one of the wins would be at Kentucky. But that's why you play the games, and a lot of good feelings come out of that. And I don't know, you may know this, Chris, if the students are on break, spring break or not Saturday, but I hope they're not, because the gym could really be a fun place to be Saturday.
No, we're a week out from spring break.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I remember, I don't know if people remember this. I think I said in the pod last week with you that I felt like they needed to go 3-1 in the last 4 to have a chance. I felt like 4-0 probably would have done it, but I think what people missed in there, and I think I even said this maybe in a written piece this week, that if you're going to go 3-1, LSU in a way might be the game you want to lose, because that means you've beaten Kentucky and beaten Mississippi State. Those are resume-building wins. I mean, look, losing at LSU is a quad 3 loss, but it feels like a lot of times the big wins weigh more than the bad losses. Look, I still think they beat Mississippi State Saturday. They're still on the outside looking in. I'd have to compare them to everybody else because it's always a comparative game, and I haven't done the deep dive lately. I still figure that's the case, but funny enough, they've taken care of one of the last 2 things remaining, and I think the state win, if they can get that, and that's going to be tough without Liam Robbins, especially with that particular matchup. We'll get into that into a minute. But anyway, here they are just very unexpectedly in that spot.
Well, yeah, and you know, you talk about that matchup Saturday, the Tolu-Smith and Mississippi State's a very physical, good defensive team, tough inside. When you have Quentin and basically Dia as your inside guys, and then Studi having to play basically the 4 position, and he's not a physical guy really. He does his best sometimes. I think that part of his game has gotten better. I think his shooting has gone south, but his rebounding and his work on the defensive end has gotten a little better. It's going to make for another one of those, I think, nail biter games where possibly it'll come down to the last couple of possessions again.
Let's not go further without rewinding the Kentucky game. Liam Robbins gets hurt. I'm afraid he's out for the year. I'm not reporting, just based on what I've picked up here and there. It seems like that's the expectation. By the time people hear this, there may have been an announcement on it. But in any case, look, I'll be honest, when he went down last night, and we're doing this on Thursday afternoon, I'm just thinking there's no way they're going to win up there without him on senior night, for whatever senior night is worth, if you're Kentucky.
Well, for Kentucky,
right.
Kentucky's one of those teams that don't lose on senior night usually.
Yeah, but point is, I thought from that point on, mentally, I'm just like, okay, there's no way, and that's what made that all the more impressive.
Yeah, I'm with you. I told my wife, I said, when it happened, I said, well, I'm going to watch every bit of this because they're the kids, but we're going to have to. First of all, you can't have the blue whistle, which you get a lot up there, and you can't have. You got to be able to shoot the basketball well. And I felt like, again, if you told me that Thomas and Studi were 0 for, I guess, 9 from 3 combined, there's no way we win the game. But Jordan Wright stepped up big time, And let's look at that for a second. The thing that went down with Tyron Lawrence, and we're thinking, okay, is this the end of it? Is after the blowout at Alabama, and then Tyron doesn't play because he had some problems in practice by smiling or whatever it was that he went through. The way these kids have responded to that, you have to say he's pushing the right buttons because they have certainly responded. And again, it happened again with Jordan last night after the situation against Florida.
Yeah, look, I know he got questioned for the Lawrence thing, but you're a coach, you got to take control of your team. I never heard that there was anything unfair about it. Now, it seemed a little nitpicky maybe, but the kids have obviously responded to him. That's 4 years in a row he's not lost the team out of 4 being in Nashville down the stretch. They're always playing their best basketball this time of the year. There was a lot of talk of disharmony, the mass transfers out in other places. I never heard that. I'm not saying that didn't exist. I just never heard that.
Right.
I mean, look, I've had my issues with Jerry Stackhouse, but he's got his team playing hard. He's had his team respond to adversity in a really tight spot. And frankly, I thought he drew up a really nice little thing there on that last set of the game. I thought he handled that pretty well. Now, look, if I want to pick bones with last night, I thought he left Malora Brown out too long. I don't know if that ended up being the right move or just a move that worked out. But however you resolve that question, Jerry Stackhouse deserves a lot of credit. He also deserves some blame for the first 3 months or 2 months or whatever it is, but he also gets a ton of credit for how he's handled the last month.
Well, yeah, and I think this, we talked about it, I think on the last podcast, it can be both, and it is both. The poor showing in non-conference, which has kind of been a pattern that he looked at those as exhibition games, so to speak. And I think he learned a hard lesson if we don't get in this year that you can't do that at all anymore. And you got to really pay attention to who you schedule, when you schedule them, who you schedule over exams, and when you maybe even look at somehow not playing a game during that time. I've always thought, why do you not play? Just play an extra one, maybe play 3 games in 5 to 6 days or something and not play an exam week game. I don't know if that can be done. But that's just as important as winning these conference games, and we're seeing that right now. I have all the respect in the world for his coaching ability. I have nothing bad to say about it. The ancillary stuff is what needed to be fixed, and I think he's on his way to repair that. If he does, and he stays at Vanderbilt, whether he wants to stay on his own or not, or take a pro job or whatever it may be, I think Vanderbilt could do a lot worse than Jerry Stackhouse.
I'm trying to look ahead a little bit at projected standings. Before we look at that, I want you to offer, because I'm going to pull it up and I'm going to need a second. I want to let you offer some thoughts more on last night that we didn't get into.
Well, I again, like you said, and you felt the same way, and I think anybody that's true to themselves would said when Liam went out that, hey, we're going to be the chances of us winning this basketball game are slim and none, and Slim just left the building. And I felt that way too. But again, it was because of our dogged determination that we won the game. It wasn't. And, of course, obviously, Jordan playing his best game of the year probably. But Tyron Lawrence getting to the rim, he just does what he has to do. I think Tyron's one of those kids that is a mellow, chill kid and sometimes needs to be pushed because he has NBA capabilities, in my opinion. Because he can get to the rack, he can create his own shot. He's got a good enough three. And I will say this, and over this season, but one of the best luck shots we had last night was the one he hit, the three-pointer that hit the flange and fell straight in. That shot was a total missed shot, and it went in for a three-point basket. It was a huge basket in the game. And then, of course, Q's three right before halftime, which was a beautiful thing to see. I think he's more proud of that than any of his taking charges and rebounds. He was so excited he hit that three.
That was a good-looking three off his hand. I mean, like, as soon as he shoots a three-pointer, I said to my son when the ball's in the air, that's not the shot you wanted, but it was about perfect in the way it was executed.
You know what's amazing? The first shot he took in the year was a three that he made against Memphis, if you remember that. I remember when he made it, I think it was from the corner, and I'm thinking, you mean Q is now shooting threes? And, of course, he didn't shoot, but I guess what, 6 or 7 more the year if he's shot that many, and he's made 3, I think, in his career. But that's interesting. The first shot of the year was the 3 that he made, and then 29 games later he makes another one.
I think you're confusing him with somebody else because he was 0 for 1 for 3 against Memphis. Excuse me, he was 0 for 1 on 3 against Memphis. He'd only shot 3 all year, shot 1 against Alabama.
Well, when did he make his other 3s then? I guess
there was no other 3 he's made. That's the first one he's hit his whole career, including Rice.
Well, what did I see last night that he was 3 for 11 in his career from 3? I don't know where.
Maybe, yeah. I'm looking at Ken Palm. They don't have him attempting another 3 in his career, other than the other 2 he's shot this year. But
if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I will say this: Q mentioned on the post game with Kevin Ingram that he and Liam has helped him with his shot, and that they've been working on it in the gym, and that he said he's been making a lot of them. So. Who knows? Maybe he can add this to his repertoire.
Okay, I'm looking at Ken Pomeroy right now. His projected standings, he has got Alabama 17-1, Texas A&M 14-4, Tennessee 12-6, Kentucky, Missouri, and Vandy all tied at 11-7 for 4th place. I've already done the math on this a little bit. Missouri gets the 4 if it plays out that way. And I think, Kentucky gets the 5 because it's 1-1 against Vanderbilt. So then it goes to the top of the standings. Neither team beat Alabama. A&M has already clinched the 2 seed. And so Kentucky did beat A&M, which Vanderbilt did not. So Vanderbilt would be tied for 4th, but the 6th seed if all the favorites went out. I say favorite. Vanderbilt could not be a favorite by any less of a margin on Ken Palm, which has got the Commodores as a 1-point favorite, but a 50% shot to win, which means whatever his decimals are, factoring the home team, they've got to be like 1/10 of a point favorite to win. Now, the flip side to that, too, is that's also calculating with what Robbins has done, but on the other hand, hey, the way they're playing and the way they just played in Lexington, I don't know that I'd bet against them right now either.
Well, let me ask you that then. With that, I understand. I agree with what you just said. If Tennessee, Kentucky both lose and Missouri wins, because Missouri's got the easiest path with playing Ole Miss at home, where would we fall then?
Say that again.
If Tennessee and Kentucky both lose, but Missouri wins, where would Vanderbilt fall?
Well, that already factored in Missouri winning, and that also factored in Kentucky losing, which Kentucky plays at Arkansas.
So the Tennessee losing doesn't matter if they lose?
No, Tennessee is projected to win. Now, in a 4-way tie scenario, it's funny, I actually figured this out already for another endeavor I did. If you have a 4-way tie between Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, and Vandy, here's your scenario. Missouri wins the 4-way tiebreaker, gets the 4 seed. Kentucky gets the next one by virtue of being 3-2 against those teams. Missouri is 3-0 in that against the 4-team group. Vanderbilt is next at 2-3, and Tennessee is next at 1-4. So that would go at that point: Alabama 1, A&M 2, Missouri 3, Kentucky 4, and Vanderbilt 5. This season of the Vandy Sports Podcast has been made possible by my friend Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. When it comes to general or cosmetic dentistry services, Jody is the best in Nashville. Just check out his client list. It testifies to that. He sees movie stars, music stars, athletes, coaches, you name it. Jody is the dentist of choice for stars in Nashville, but he sees regular folks like you and I as well. What people love about Jody's office is the ambiance. It's relaxing. It's friendly. Someone described it to me as a tooth spa. Whether your needs are general or cosmetic, go see Jody today. Call him 615-270-2322. See him at 55 Music Square East, not far from downtown or the Vanderbilt campus. Jody is a former Vanderbilt football player and a huge Commodore booster, so go and talk Vandy sports with him while you're there. Go see Jody Jones today. Thank him for his support of this podcast, because without it, this season would not be possible.
Okay.
So really, I think you'd almost rather be the 6th seed. If you are the 6, then here's your draw. You get the winner of 11 and 14, which if the favorites pan out, it's Georgia and LSU. So you get that one, and then you get the 3 the next game, which under that scenario would be Missouri. Under other scenarios, it could also be Kentucky. It could also be Tennessee. But the important thing is you stay out of that Alabama half of the bracket until the title game, if you get the 6 and not the 5. And that also holds true for the 7, which I don't know if they can be the 7 or not. Let's see. That would be...
They can't be the 7 because they'd win the tiebreaker with Auburn.
Well, it depends on... If it's a single tie, then yes. If it's a multiple tie, which would involve Missouri losing to Ole Miss in Columbia, doubtful to happen. Them losing to Mississippi State, and then Auburn winning over Tennessee. Then you've got a 3-way tie at 10 and 7. And let's see. We know Vanderbilt is 1 and 1 against those two teams. We know that Missouri beat Auburn, or beat Vandy, and Missouri lost to Auburn. So everybody looks like in this scenario is knotted up at 1 apiece. So then you go back to the top of the standings. None of those teams beat Alabama. So A&M is your next team. And A&M, let's see, beat Missouri, beat Vandy, beat Missouri twice. So does Vanderbilt win the tiebreaker in that scenario by being 0-1 against A&M instead of 0-2?
Yeah, it's kind of like a half-game win. Yeah.
I never thought about that scenario. Well, Auburn's also in there. And Auburn, let's see, against Texas A&M, also lost 2. So isn't that weird?
So Vandy,
I guess if that's how you break the tie, Vandy wins a 3-way tiebreaker in that scenario by virtue of being 0-1 against A&M instead of 0-2.
That's right.
That doesn't seem right, but that may be how that works.
I think that's it, because what else could it be?
Yeah. So anyway, but I mean, then, let's see, but
so 4th, 5th, or 6th.
Then you get in the top half of the bracket with Alabama, right?
Correct.
Which is not really where you want to be.
No,
so really what you want is for Tennessee to win, I think, and be the 3. You want, because you just want to tie with Missouri, because then you lose that one and you get the 6. It's all weird.
Yeah, we'll know here in about 48 hours. So,
yeah,
but we're anywhere between 4th and 6th.
Yeah,
and I think Chris, you were talking about scenarios for them to get in. I think it's obvious we got to win 3 more games in a row. I think we have to beat State. We have to win our next 2 after that, and then you can see where other upsets don't happen or do happen. All the other things that are involved in it, the small conference that only get the 1-bid leagues, it may get a second bid, all of that stuff factors in. But if we're at least in the conversation for sure, if we win the next 3, and it's going to be a tough order without Liam.
Well, and I think they need to win out and make it obvious, because if it's between 2 teams and they're dead even, and I'm not saying this is fair to Vanderbilt, it just is. It just pours salt in the wound. But if the committee's trying to put together the best tournament and 2 teams are even, and Vanderbilt doesn't have Robbins, and whatever team it is tied with in the eyes of the committee has a full deck, then you know who's going to win that one.
Yeah, and I brought that up actually on the last show. We how it factors in, like Tennessee losing Ziegler. So with him out for the year, will they fall to possibly a 5 seed instead of a 3 or 4?
Well, Tennessee, and I don't want to go in a rabbit hole. Tennessee's got an interesting case because it loses Ziegler, but it also gets back 2 starters in Phillips and James, who haven't played a lot lately. So,
but they don't
sort of get some additions too, in addition to that subtraction.
unless they bring the redshirt off that Edward. Remember the kid's name, the freshman. Going to be the point for most time. Him and Meshack.
Yeah, Edwards. I think Edwards has played this year a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. So, in fact, he played against South Carolina 2 games ago. So, anyway, we'll take our detour off Tennessee. I'm sure the audience loves that one. Anything else on hoops before we get into baseball?
No. Again, just I hope the atmosphere is like it was in Florida at least Saturday. And now that you've told me spring break doesn't start till after Saturday, we should have a great atmosphere Saturday. So get on out there if you're a Vandy fan, and because I don't think State will bring a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, first game in Memorial in a long time this late in the season that has some meaning.
Yeah, big time.
Okay, baseball. Vanderbilt got a really nice series win over UCLA over the weekend. Was down 7-2 to Austin Peay, came back and won that one 11-7. So really good week, going 3-1. How are you feeling about the baseball team at this point?
Good. I think there's 2 or 3 guys on this team that they're not hitting yet, and I just feel like they're going to hit. Being Enrique, Shrek. And then I think Parker is hitting okay, but I think he's got another level he can jump to. I noticed the other night he went to left field twice with a hit one time and maybe got another hit. But when he starts going to left and left center, that's when he's in a groove. So I think those 3 guys, when they get rolling, along with R.J. Austin, who's doing great, and, of course, Fastime, who right now is the best hitter on the team, and Matthew Polk, then you've got 6 good bats in there. Diaz is making much better contact than he did last year. His average isn't up there yet, but making much better contact. And we actually saw a Jack Bulger sighting with the bat in his hands the other day. I felt like he had 2 really good at-bats in that Austin Peay game. So once the bats get going, again, I think we're going to figure out that we've got 10 good pitchers. We do have to figure out our midweek starting situation. Patrick, again, was not effective. He was wild. They hit him, and I feel for Patrick, but it's time for him. He's a senior. If he wants that role to at least be the Tuesday or midweek starter, he's got to be better.
I'm looking at the stat sheet. Strikeouts have been a big point of complaint in recent years with the fan. They've struck out 63 times in 9 games. Which is not a lot in college baseball these days. It's 7 a game.
No. Anything less than 10 in a game for us would be great. I think, and we're striking out opponents at what, around the 11 or 12 mark?
They've struck out 106. So yeah, that's about 12 a game. Yeah.
So I'll take that right now the rest of the year. 7 and 12 would be fine with me. Of course, it's going to go up some when we get in the SEC and you got those Friday night arms and so forth. But right now, that's probably the most pleasing thing about the offense is they're making better contact, more contact.
Yeah, if you want to nitpick 2 things, maybe you'd like to see the contact being a little harder. Perhaps that is a trade-off between not striking out is swinging for a little less power. But just trying to put the ball in play, yeah.
You're right, but when you put it in play, and we saw that in the Austin Peay game, good things happen.
Right.
Because of our team speed, there was 2 or 3 plays the other night directly. The errors of the rush throws by Austin Peay was because of our speed, and we've got that. We've got a lot of kids that can run.
Yeah, you beat me to it. That win over UCLA at the end of the year. I think that series win is going to be big. That's 2 back-to-back weekends where they've done things that are going to matter with the committee when it comes to seeding and hosting and all those things. So that's a big deal. By the way, UCLA, and of course the teams that it's played haven't been outstanding. It got, in 3 games against Omaha, 16 runs, 23 runs, and 8 runs, gave up 1-0-1, beat Pepperdine 11-2, and then its only other game that didn't involve Vanderbilt to beat Michigan out in L.A. on Wednesday, beat them 9-4. So UCLA has been pretty impressive when not playing Vanderbilt. Again, that's including 3 games against Omaha, which I would presume is practicing in freezing temperatures and probably practicing limited amounts of time at this point of year. It's very windy and cold in Nebraska in February, if you can imagine that. But anyway, for whatever that's worth, I do think that UCLA series win is going to be big come year's end.
Well, the one thing that we're basically, and maybe there's somebody else in the SEC, I haven't studied all the schedules, but because we will play what amounts to 13 SEC weekends. You've got our 10 we normally play, and then you've got what we did in Texas, what we did against UCLA, and then you still got Louisville, who's ranked, and Maryland, who's ranked, that will play as well. So you're playing 3 weekends that are almost conference level competition. I know Minnesota hasn't won a game. Nebraska's like 3-1, but Maryland is ranked, and I think had 1 win over Ole Miss. So it should be interesting. We need to win 2 of the 3 in this weekend.
Yeah, and I think they can do that. They catch Maryland on Saturday rather than Friday. They got a stud on Friday that you don't want to see. So there's that. And, of course, Maryland played at Ole Miss last week and won the Friday game, dropped the final 2.
Right, and I think, unless I'm mistaken, isn't the first game Friday for Ole Miss and Maryland again? I think I saw that on their schedule.
The first game Friday, unless they're playing on a different field, Vanderbilt plays Nebraska at 11.
Yeah, I know we do. I'm talking about Ole Miss and Maryland.
Oh, got you. Yeah, maybe so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's yeah, and then like I said, Minnesota, the host team, is 0-8. But the reason I make that comparison, of course, you know me, I'm going to always go to the Tennessee comparison. They're playing absolutely nobody, and then they got Gonzaga, who's 1-7 for a 3-game set at home this weekend. So they're not going to get tested until they get in league play.
Gotcha. Yeah, but that's a weird dynamic of the schedule. Vanderbilt is going to be on the same field with Missouri, Arkansas, and Ole Miss. 3 teams it plays in the SEC before it plays any of them.
Yeah, exactly.
I love their schedule. I really do. It's fun because it feels like they're playing meaningful baseball every weekend. Back to the pitching thing. They've got to be thrilled with how it's worked on weekends with Futrell and Holton and Owen. I know that Owen's capable of a little bit more than he's shown, and Holton was a little wonky on the first start, but you feel like they're in good hands. You feel like Nick Maldonado, my goodness. Remember when Landon Sims was pitching for Mississippi State a couple of years ago? Maldonado is giving him that kind of just, it seems like it's over when he enters the game kind of feel right now.
Yeah, what's he pitched? 4 innings, and hadn't been touched yet. So
he's pitched 5, he's struck out 11, he's given up 3 runners, and all of them have been walks or singles.
Okay. Yeah, well, yeah, if you keep that up, you'll be the best reliever in the conference. But he looks like his old self. They were calling 2 years ago, I remember sitting behind Kumar's daddy, and someone sitting with Mr. Rocker was calling him the doctor. They were calling him Dr. Nick.
Yeah.
So there is a in the house. So he's back to his form, and I hope it stays that way.
Now, they've had some issues throwing strikes outside of some of those guys. They ran into some trouble with that. You talked about Riley. I just wonder, maybe that gets fixed at some point in his career, but you wonder out of the gate, is it going to be this year when you're seeing the same thing you saw in the past? And then Sam Leboke, that poor kid, has given up now 4 home runs in 5 1/3 innings pitched, and you just wonder. Command is his thing, command and control. Peak Sam Leboke could just kind of put the ball wherever he wanted to. And when you give up 4 home runs and a double, yeah, I don't know that I've seen all the pitches that he gave up home runs on. I think when he's pitched a lot of times, I've just happened to be doing other stuff and listening to games. But that's usually indicative that you're missing spots. And sometimes first year pitching back from Tommy John surgery, that's the way it goes.
Well, you're 100% right, and Sam, it's unless I'm wrong, 3 of the 4 have been on Haynes, and that's the last thing that comes back. Your speed comes back, but my understanding is that's throwing breaking balls and location is the last thing to come around. So, and he can be good. He was great the first 20 or so pitches against TCU.
Right.
And then it just then he couldn't throw it anywhere he wanted to throw it. But I think that, the more he takes bullpens and the more he works with Brownie, he can get that corrected. I certainly am not giving up on Sam Leboke. I think a 9-game sample size after being out for 2 years, we're going to need to see a lot more of him.
I'm curious who gets the midweek start next time, whether that's Grayson Carter or whether that's Patrick Riley.
Yeah, I am too. And let me ask you a question, Chris. I don't have knowledge of this. Is Jack Anderson okay? Because he hadn't gotten in a game yet.
As far as I know, he is. I was thinking that the other day. Now, I think he'd not been super, super sharp in preseason workouts, but I would think maybe something has popped up the last week or two. I wasn't at Sunday or Tuesday's games because of family stuff.
Right.
But yeah, that might be a question to ask. Yeah.
That one and the other 2 pitchers that haven't pitched that are healthy is Colton Reagan and the other freshman, J.D.
Thompson. Yeah, and I think those 2 were far down the list in terms of being able to help them now. So
okay.
Yeah.
So we still got 13 guys. And like I said, if you can get 10 of them to play to their maximum ability, we're going to be just fine.
Well, here's the other guy. We haven't talked about Bryce Cunningham. I mean, Cunningham's been right there with Maldonado in terms of effectiveness.
Yes, absolutely. He and Grayson Carter look, I don't know how much weight they put on and muscle they put on, but they look like different kids. They look more like men than kids out there now.
The other one, and we haven't seen him much lately, David Horn looked pretty good the one time I've gotten to see him play. From my understanding, he really came on in February, and the word that I got before the season is he'd put himself in position to help. So that's another one to watch.
It is. And I will say this, Ginther had a tough outing. I forget what game it was, but he looked a lot better against Austin Peay. Now, and again, it's Austin Peay, but they had a couple of, I don't know whether they were JUCOs, but they had a couple of grown men out there swinging the bat the other night. And Ginther did a good job against them.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at it, you feel like Futrell, Holton, and Owen's pretty good rotation. Now, my concern is when the weather gets warmer, Futrell is more of a fly ball pitcher, and the ball's going to carry more than it has. And here's another thing. Devin's not exactly been pinpoint with his control. He's walked 6 guys in 10 innings. You would expect it to be about half that, so there's that to watch. But I think you've got to feel pretty good with the 3 they're putting out there on weekends right now.
I do. And what I really feel good about is the backside of that. When one day you may have Schultz, one day you may have Maldi, a couple of those days on a weekend SEC series, and then you also have Bryce Cunningham to come in, and maybe even Grayson Carter at times.
Well, here's the other thing, too. They're going to get tougher as the year goes on because these guys are going to get stretched out, and they're guys, I think, that can throw deeper in games. I mean, we have seen before Holton go 9. I think he did. We've seen Futrell go 9 in a game last year. I know Holton threw a complete game, I think in a 7 inning. I think he's done it in 9, though, too. Or he's come close. I know he's gone deep into games. I know he did it a couple times, did it in the SEC tournament last year against Ole Miss. So, Hunter Owen, his Hunter Owen stuff is really good. I don't know that people appreciate that yet, but man, his stuff is that. He had a couple pitches going on Saturday in that UCLA game, and they were having a real tough time with him.
Yes, I think the biggest key decision that Corbs and Brownie have made is the Schultz-Maldonado dynamic. And you throw Ginther in there because you got Ginther, Schultz as bridges to get to Maldonado on the weekends. And I think that's really, really key. And gosh, like I just said, with Bryce Cunningham and possibly Grayson Carter giving an inning too, they can come in and max out, blow it out, and get you 3 outs. You should be able to, if you start to give you 5 or 6 solid innings, you should be, and you got a lead, you're in pretty good shape.
Okay, I always like to count innings for weekends, okay? And so let's do this exercise. I feel like they can count on Holton for 6. Some nights it's going to be more. I feel like they can count on Futrell for 6. So that's 12 so far, and you got to get through 27. Although that could go lower this year with the 10-run rule. It could go higher with extra innings. You throw in Owen, let's say 5 conservatively. I think Owen can go more, but sometimes he struggles a little bit with his control, and he's a high strikeout guy, so that lends higher pitch count. So that's 17 innings right now. You got 10 more to go. I feel like you can get probably 3 out of Maldonado. Let's call it 2. That gives him 19. You can get 2 out of Schultz. 2 more. That gives you 21. You can get an inning out of Ginther. That gives you 22. So you got 5 innings to go. You can get 3 from Cunningham. That puts you to 25. So that gives you got to find 2 more between Horn, Dukanich, Grayson Carter, Grayson Moore.
That sounds pretty good to me.
If they want to throw Riley or Leboki, if they figure it out, would you look at it that way? I think you've got to feel, not that you didn't feel good about their pitching, but when you look at it that way, I think they're really tough to beat on the weekend. Now, look, some of this is going to come crashing down. Somebody's not going to be as effective as we think.
Right.
There's going to be a day one of these guys goes 2 1/3 and it goes sideways or whatever. But point is, if you're setting those as baselines for expectations, and I don't think those numbers are unfair, they're in really good shape with arms left over for midweek.
Well, you know, the other day, and we've talked about this, Chris, in that first weekend, some of the criticism, if there has been much of Vandy baseball, would be that you're letting pitchers go too long. Well, Saturday against Austin Peay, that wasn't the case. Now, Leboki comes in and gives up the grand slam, unfortunately, but he didn't go long with Riley. You know, it was time to go, and he went. So I think that's going to be key as well in these SEC weekends. With the arms we have, there's no reason to leave a guy in there that's struggling with control, because you leave a guy in one batter too long, that turns a W into an L real quick.
Well, and I think that's the right move. I know that they want to get their confidence with guys, but I've said this from the beginning, man, that they got a tough schedule.
They do.
They got a really tough schedule. I mean, there's no easy weekends. I don't know what Loyola Marymount is. I'll look, they're 3-4 right now, but the WCC teams are usually pretty respectable.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, Loyola, let's see, played 3-game series with Oklahoma State, lost 1-0, won 10-8, lost 11-1 in 7 innings. I guess they ran out of pitching, but otherwise were right there blow for blow with Oklahoma State the first 2 weekends. Look, in baseball, you could play well and be in the middle of a 5-game losing streak in a hurry. And
Absolutely.
Your margins for error, and here's the thing, I've been thinking this all along. You really want to be in good shape, and not that any of these series are going to be easy, but you end at Alabama, which I think is pretty good, at Florida, which we know is pretty good. I think Florida's the best team in the East. And then Arkansas, where the pitching is starting to fall apart, but Dave Horn, he's kind of been 1B to Tim Corbin's 1A in terms of being consistent. Kevin O'Sullivan's in there too. Now, there haven't been the championships in Omaha, but Arkansas almost never misses the tournament. I think Van Horn's missed it once, maybe twice, and he's been in Arkansas, I think 1 or 2 years longer than Corbin's been at Vandy. I could be a little mixed up on that, but I think I'm right. You want to be, and by the way, 2 weekends before that, you got a road trip to Tennessee. You know, in that Missouri series in Columbia, Missouri's no pushover this year. I've watched those guys. Point is, like, you've got to have a certain amount of wins to be able to host or to get whatever seed you want. I don't think you've got a lot of games to play around with, and you certainly don't want a midweek loss against an Austin Peay or somebody like that spiraling into you go somewhere, get swept the next weekend, and then maybe with your back's against the wall, you lose another midweek. I think that patience with your pitching, given the depth of your staff this year, might not be the play as much as it usually is.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Chris, about the midweek stuff, because I want to go back to that. We've got to figure that out. Last year we had a luxury in Devin pitching on the week. He was great. He was lights out during the week, and you could count on that. I think we only lost to Louisville, maybe one other midweek game, or maybe it was just Louisville.
I think it was just Louisville.
Yeah, and that was just 1-0. So, that's key for this. That's the big question mark to me right now, and that's the only question mark. I feel good. Like we just went through the innings thing. Heck, we still got extras in there, extra innings. I think you could get 30-something innings if you have extra inning games. We've got enough pitching to lengthen out to that as well, I think. I'm just one other thing I want to mention about the hitting. I think this year we're not going to have anybody hit 15 home runs, but we may have 5 or 6, 7 guys hit between 8 and 10.
Yeah.
I think that's what you see with this team.
Yeah. Well, and just to kind of wrap that up, I was concerned it would not have been hard for them to go to Arlington and lose 2 out of 3. Would not have been hard for them to lose 2 out of 3 against UCLA. Both those were, there were some close games in there. You throw in a midweek loss to Central Arkansas last week, that could have very easily been 2-5 out of the gate, and again, no easy weekends. So that was big for them to get what they got for a bunch of reasons.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. This has been a very ambitious schedule. We've already played 2 SEC weekends, basically, in my mind, and we've come out with a 4-2 mark. So and so we got to solve that midweek stuff. And I think next week we got Tennessee Tech and Evansville in the midweek.
Yeah.
So we got to solve that because, like you said, you don't want to. And I know in the past, I don't know if this is still true, but Tim used to be more upset sometimes about losing those midweek games than he would be losing a conference series.
Yeah, look, if they're able to go 17-13 in the SEC, which won't be easy, but it's certainly doable, you can go ahead and book yourself a weekend in Nashville for the first weekend of SEC tournament or NCAA tournament play, and you might be able to go ahead and book 2.
Chris, right now, too, if you ask me who are the 2 teams that will miss going to Birmingham, I'm thinking right now it's hard to pick. I mean, Mississippi State's had a lot of problems with pitching, and A&M has not played great. Kentucky's been okay, but they haven't played anybody. I don't know who those 2 teams would be right now because I don't think Missouri's going to be one of them this year. I agree with you. I think they've improved.
Right now, I think Georgia and Kentucky are the worst 2 teams in the league, but worse is relative. I think Georgia's got an old lineup that can really hit at times, and I think their pitching's – it was a question coming in. I think it's proven to be a question, but Kentucky went to Elon opening weekend and only gave up 3 runs all weekend. And Elon, I don't think is horrible at baseball. I could be wrong, but you give up 3 runs to anybody – and that's pretty good. And that was on the road.
Right. Elon did win one of those games. I think they won the first one. They shut out Kentucky 3-0.
Yeah, I think that might be right.
You're right. Yeah, but you're right. Kentucky's probably that's why I'm saying it's tough to pick. It's always tough to pick who's going to win the thing. It's certainly tough this year, more so than the years past. I think you always penciled in Missouri as probably not making it, but I don't think you can do that anymore.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of parity in this league. By the way, Elon is, Elon's 4-5. I know we're getting on a rabbit trail here. I'm just trying to figure out who's good in this league and who's not. I think there's a good bit of parity 1-14. LSU to me is obviously the best team, and I think Florida is the second best team. But I don't know that between, 1 and 10, that maybe is as much difference as people think on a given weekend. And I don't think at this point, it seems to me that whoever misses Hoover, just to echo what you say, I don't see just an awful baseball team in this league. In a lot of years, you'll see one or two right off the bat.
Right. Now, strength of schedule, it has to be ours is the toughest. I don't know all the other.
You mean so far, or you mean at the end of the year?
I'm talking about right now when we play our out-of-conference from game, however many we play, who will have the toughest out-of-conference schedule? It has to be us.
Yeah, I'm looking at, and this is sort of a ridiculous exercise, but let's see. Warren Nolan does a predicted RPI, and let me see what he's got here. These are kind of crazy, but I think I remember looking at this the other day. Okay, I think this is a little bit out of whack right now. Yeah, okay. These change minute by minute. He's got Vanderbilt going 32-23 with a 14-16 record and a 21 strength of schedule. There's no way they're going to have a 21 strength of schedule. I mean, they are going to avoid LSU. They're going to avoid A&M. And A&M did lose a series to Portland. A&M also lost a series last year early to Penn and really turned it around. And they avoid Auburn, which is always a little better than people think. So I don't know at this point whether they're – I mean, you definitely don't want to play LSU, and I'm pretty sure you don't want to play A&M. So, I mean, they are – there's a lot of teams I'd rather play that they play than those three. So I think that the SEC is going to be tough no matter who you play, and their out-of-conference portion of the schedule on the weekends is – I don't know. If there's anybody in the country that had a tougher schedule than them, I'd love to know who that is.
Right.
All right, parting thoughts before we end today. I didn't do a mailbag just for sake of time. It's 4:30 this afternoon. I've been going since 6:30 straight. So we are running on fumes here this week at the Vandy Sports Podcast.
Well, that's understandable. I'll be seeing you out at practice after spring break when they're going to practice, I think, 3 more times, and then the kids will go on break. So I won't be out there until after that, but I'll see you then, and we'll talk some football hopefully and see where we're at on that. And like I said earlier, one note on football, I feel like the biggest improvement on that football team is going to be the secondary. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that. I think that's going to be the biggest improvement. And everyone's going to be really – and part of that's going to be because I think we're going to have a little bit better pass rush.
You know, it's funny. I've been to the first 2 practices, and the energy has been different than I've seen it. There is open talk of bowl games when in the past it's been process. That tells me they've got some expectations this year. I've talked to a coach or two off the record. You can just feel a palpable difference. Now, look, fans love to take that stuff and run with it, and I think that's overrated. Sure. But if you want to know, that's what I'm seeing. And yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting. And by the way, we won't talk any football today, and I probably won't talk much on the podcast. But plug for our site. If you're not paying $99 a year and subscribing to the site, you're missing a ton of stuff there. And we are giving fairly detailed practice reports when we're there, which is most of the time. I think I've now been to, 20-something practices in a row between fall and spring. I will skip Saturdays because I've got a conflict with baseball, and I'm going to cover a meaningful game over a practice. But if you don't subscribe to the site, we're giving you a lot of insight on football there too.
Absolutely. Can I say one more quick thing about football?
You bet.
Before we go. I feel like, when Clark first got there, we were at the bottom of the heap, obviously. And we stayed that way his first year. He was just, like he has said himself, you're still stripping down. You haven't even started your foundation. So by the end of the year, had gotten a little bit better. The South Carolina game, Missouri game, whatever. Last year, and when we get those 2 SEC wins, I think you're now moved to where you're in those bottom 4 teams still. But you've moved up. You've taken that next step. I think this year you take that next step where you're possibly anywhere from 7 to 10 in the conference. Now, we're still light years away from the top 2 or 3 teams, and we saw that last year. Those were the 3 blowouts. So I think that's where we're at as a fan base, which means we should be talking bowl. We have a chance to go to a bowl. Now, obviously, that doesn't guarantee anything. You still got to win the games. To already be at that at year 3.
Luke, I think I lost you there, but if not, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Chris. Have a great night.
You bet. Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's episode. We thank our presenting sponsor, Jody Jones DDS. We thank our other sponsors, Sutherland and Belk and MyPerfectFranchise.net. If you're interested in sponsoring this podcast, and that's how we make this work, please email me at chrisley70@gmail.com. We also ask that you subscribe to our website, vandysports.com. That is $99 a year. You get things there that you don't get here. And of course, please rate, review, and subscribe where you see our podcast. That helps us get noticed. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at vandysports.com. Follow me at chrisley70. And finally, subscribe to our Vandy Sports YouTube channel as well. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast, which is part of the 440 Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. We'll catch you with another episode coming very soon.